more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Welcome back, friends and fellow beer lovers and fellow sobs. We have worked our way to the very end of the BJCP guidelines, the 2021 BJCP guidelines. And I know, and I haven't had a beer yet, so it'll just get better, I'm sure. So we are finishing up in the local styles. These are fantastic styles that are emerging on a local level that are different enough that warrant some attention from those who are studying and creating these guidelines. And so therefore, that's how this next style got in there, because they're thinking, wait a minute, we need to keep an eye on what's happening down in New Zealand, because they're putting out the New Zealand Pilsner that is not your German Pilsner, not your American Pilsner, but it's a very distinct, separate entity in and of itself. And it's kind of exciting. And especially for those of us who remember I remember in the kind of the later teens, hoppy lagers or IPLs or India Pale lagers just became such a rage that we're like, wait, what if we add more hops in this? And I'm sure people experimented with that long before as well, but it really became something that captured our attention, and it never completely went away. And so when we start playing with all these different possibilities, it really gets kind of fun. And so I hope you have fun with the style. I've had fun with the style, Julia. I'm sure you've enjoyed it as well. But tell us what you think of this style, Julia, and then lead us into the ingredients.
So because we're talking local styles and we're literally focusing on the New Zealand Pilsner, which is so nice to see dedicated in Beer Judge Certification Program style guidelines, it's worth noting in talking about ingredients that New Zealand wasn't always known for their hops, right? This is a great example of what a country can do to get on the map. And so we've got this Nelson Sauvignon, inspired by Nelson Sauvignon, right? The white wine grape, that flavor. And you've got this unique soil, this unique climate of New Zealand that is giving us now that it has matured in its hop growing, because it can take 5, 10, 15 years really for hop vines to certainly not produce. They will produce within 3 often, but to really come into their own. And so you've got 10 plus, even more varieties of New Zealand hops. It's not just the Nelson Sauvignon. So this is a hoppy beer, right? A Pilsner though, not an IPA, with an emphasis on the New Zealand hops. And you want to know what's obviously out there, go to your local homebrew shop, order online, go to a brewery, and smell the different variety of these types of New Zealand hops. And you're going to get a sense of, it's really not just focusing on bitterness, but these tropical notes, these beautiful, delicate, white wine, almost fruity notes. So anyway, that's a big anchor, is the hops in the ingredients of these Pilsners. Also for the base malts, the fermentation for Pilsners is going to be strict if you're talking German Pilsners, but this variety of Pilsner has some variety of base malts. It's not just the Pilsner malt. You could have other pale malts that are often used for other types of beers. You also have a small percentage of wheat added to these beers, which I think is super fun. Add some girth, some weight, some protein, some coloriform and head retention, which is exciting. And then you've got a water profile that you're paying attention to if you're brewing these, a low mineral water profile. What that means is low ion, right? softer on the mouth. And then there's an emphasis of more emphasis on chloride than sulfate. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, then take a deep dive, go down the rabbit hole of water additions to different types of beers from different types of the different areas of the world, or brewing and mimicking an area of the world with water additions where you're brewing it locally. The yeast, too, on top of that, beyond this, the water addition adjustments, lager yeast is very, very common, or believe it or not, a very non-aggressive, kind of more neutral, as the style guidelines say, ale yeast. So it's not about really the esters in the ale yeast that would produce what you want, even though you can ferment these with ale yeast, especially if you're entering them competition, that's okay. But it's more about those fruity and tropical notes from the hops as opposed to what the yeast might deliver.
Yeah. And I love with that water profile that they talk about, that the chlorides in other parts of the world tends to bring the malt into brighter focus and to de-emphasize the hops. Now, when you have this hop-centric, this beautiful hop beer, then it's just going to help kind of balance everything out and round everything out and give it this beautiful round mouthfeel that's not going to be harsh. I'm sure the bitterness is going to be there, but it's not going to be harsh. And the ones that I've had have been really interesting and fun to drink. When we get into the appearance of this, honestly, the appearance is not going to be the differentiation from other beers. It's not something to hang your hat on, because it is basically a craft Pilsner. So that means we're looking really at a very straw pale color to maybe even a deep gold. Quite a range there for Pilsner, but it is a craft version of it. We expect this to be brilliantly clear, so clear that you could read a book from behind your glass. And I dare you to try, or at least try reading a book and have one of these at the same time. What a great day. What a great afternoon that would be. We're recording this on a Friday, and I'm already thinking, man, that would be perfect to end the day. When we get back to this beer and the way it looks, when you pour it well, you can expect a very creamy, long-lasting, persistent head of foam. And an emphasis on how well you pour it. Power to the people on this one. If you pour it very silently and gently, then you have a little bit. So play with this a little bit. You can get some really good foam out of this. More importantly, tell us about the aroma.
Yes, and it is good to overview the aroma in the queue up that I was going over in discussing ingredients, because the hop profile, right? The hop character is supposed to be the most prominent aspect of this beer in the aroma and the flavor, but emphasized in the guidelines is that the malt character should be evident. So that's important to note. And we're talking medium to high hop aroma. And these types of, I mentioned tropical, white grapes. We've got lime, grapefruit. That's a good descriptor. Gooseberry, honeydew, melon. Doesn't that all sound attractive and lovely? I think they allow for in the guidelines, because of the character of some of these New World hops, the light green pepper or grassy aspect. You want a light, delicate hand on those. You don't want that to distract, but it's allowed because that's a trait known for some of these New World hops. The emphasis on allowing very low acceptable dimethyl sulfide is amazing. That DMS character, it is common when you often ferment with Pilsner malt. Classic homebrewer challenge of brewing your first couple of batches and not knowing that you should have an uncovered boil, so that DMS or dimethyl sulfide volatilizes out. And so I'm used to, from my early days in homebrewing, really knowing what that profile is. That cooked creamed corn can really go to celery and other flavors if you don't watch
Tomato
it.
soup. It's awful.
Tomato soup, yep. But very low DMS is acceptable, right? So remember that those flavor components to me are allowable in some styles. They're not off flavors, so you shouldn't call them off flavors. DMS is not an off flavor. It's allowable in some styles, but you don't want it to be dominant. And then the yeast character I kind of already noted. So that's kind of the big picture, and that would lead us straight into the best part, which is flavor.
Yeah, and so we talked about that water profile a second ago. And so this is really a kind of a beer style. Even the German Pilsner, the original, the Czech Pilsner, it really is a hoppy style. It's meant to kind of display this beautiful balance of bitterness and the flavor of hops. And this really isn't that much different, but just because of that water profile and having that chloride is going to take that the malt aspect, the malt character a little forward. And it's almost like if you've got the hops and the malt on a stage with the microphone, well, the hops are going to be right up on the microphone, like real close. And the malt is going to be way back here. So you can hear them, but it's not that pronounced, right? Nice little audio effect. But that chloride is going to bring that malt closer and closer to the mic. So there's a better balance. For those of you who are watching, you're probably wondering what the heck he's doing. But those of you listening, hopefully you get it now. That's what's going to happen with that malt. So therefore, this malt is going to have this medium low to medium grainy, bready, cracker kind of malt character, but it's gonna have some presence within this beer. The hop bitterness, medium to high, but remember that's just a quantitative number or a range of how the hop bitterness is going to manifest. Now we need to discuss the quality of it, and every beer is going to be a little bit different. Just a rule of thumb, no beer should ever be harsh. This ought to be very smooth and delicate, but pronounced bitterness. Same thing, the hop flavor is also going to be moderate to high. You're going to have these new world tropical hop characteristics and flavors of tropical fruit, of mango, lychee. I love star fruit in my beer. Could be berries, could be melons, could be the green grapes from that Nelson Sauvin hop as well. Just this beautiful, interesting bouquet of which kind of leads to aroma, but the same thing in the flavor. It's all going to be really wonderful. But the fermentation, because it's either a lager yeast or a hybrid ale yeast, the fermentation character is going to be pretty clean, pretty minimal, if at all. So we just really expect the malt and the hops to have the full presence on the stage. Let's round this off with mouthfeel.
Very straightforward. And Jeremy, you kind of already alluded to some of it. Medium to medium light body, which would be indicative for most Pilsners if you're going to describe them. Medium to medium high carbonation. I love that. I think carbonation is going to help the refreshment factor of this style in these beers. And, it's not supposed to be a harsh or astringent beer. So even though the hopping is there, we have to remember that hops have tannins, those polyphenols, and we don't want too much astringency from who is brewing it. So you don't want it to be harsh. You don't want it to be astringent. You want it to be a smooth, enjoyable beer as you are drinking it.
Yeah. So when we get to style comparison, so, Pilsner is not a Pilsner is not a Pilsner. So how does this compare to all of its Pilsner brothers and sisters out there? Well, for example, we might right away go to a Czech Pilsner, a Czech Pils, or a German Pils. Let's start with the German Pils. And Julia, you mentioned this in Stylecast's past, that the further north you go in Germany, you have a tendency to get a more mineral, not necessarily character, but affect out of the Pilsner. Meaning, it's going to be crisper, it's going to be drier. The hops are going to have this snappy, bright, bitter quality to them. This New Zealand Pilsner is, I expect to be a little bit smoother, a little bit more rounded out, and not quite as crisp, not quite as dry, or not quite as snappy. When we get to the Czech Pilsner, I expect the malt in the Czech Pilsner to be far more complex. Remember, they're doing a decoction mash with all that stuff, so you have this rich, elegant malt character coming through in the Czech Pilsners, and especially with I'm pretty certain that they have even fewer solutes in the beer as well. So the bitter, the hop bitterness is going to be a little bit more delicate. It's going to be just dance on your palate, whereas the New Zealand hoppy Pilsner, it's going to be prominent. It's not going to be aggressive. It's not going to be harsh, but it is going to be a little bit more present and a little bit more significant in the bitterness quotient, if you want to call it. And we can even compare this to a Kolsch, because it is a ale yeast at lager temps, but really Kolsches have a completely different hop profile, a completely different flavor. And so I don't agree that this is the best comparison to make, but it's in there, so let's address it. I think the big thing to remember is we're going to have a varying kind of experience with this, but it's always going to represent the New Zealand hop character, and that's where it just gets really lovely. How about some commercial examples to kind of finish this off?
Yeah, and if what the style guidelines list doesn't come your way because they're not as broadly distributed or you need to go to New Zealand to get them, which is not always the case, I see and am starting to see so many more local craft breweries, local brew pubs and microbreweries brewing their own version. So that's really exciting. And you could also brew your own too, as we always remind you, and homebrew it. The guidelines lead with Croucher New Zealand Pils, Emerson's Pilsner, Liberty Halo Pilsner, Panhead Port Road Pilsner, Sawmill Pilsner, and I will not do the best pronunciation. I haven't even had it, admittedly so, and Jeremy's already laughing at me. Jeremy, actually, will you pronounce that one?
I want to hear you say it first.
Tuatra Mott Eureka?
Yeah, I don't know the language as well. I would probably say something like Tuatara.
Tuatara Mott Eureka.
Mott Eureka.
Yeah.
So please forgive us for if we missed that, but it's nice to see different cultures represented in this stuff.
Yeah, and these examples, and that's why it's fun to go to vital statistics next, which it's Jeremy's turn, and he'll do that.
Yeah.
These are sessionable beers, these examples, right? Even though there is some mouthfeel, there is some girth, as we talked about, there is some tannins. There's a lot of nuance to these beers, and so that's what's fun to mention this list is these are some damn good examples that are really going to be poundable and enjoyable and not make you want to sit back down once you stood up.
Yeah. So when I think about Pilsners, even like a German Pils, which is off the top of my head, and please don't quote this, but they're roughly 4.5 to 5.5%, give or take. This is falling right in line with that. And if I think of 4% to 6% as just the average range of craft beers, this is 4.5. This New Zealand Pilsner kind of sits at 4.5 to 5.8. We could argue that it's 4.5 to 6. So it really fits that range really, really well. When we get to the IBUs, we're looking at 25 to 45. There's some pronounced hop character there. Probably, if for those of you who love American pale ales, that's a very similar range right there, where it doesn't overpower it, but it stands up and stands up tall. When we get to the SRM or the standard reference method, we're talking about color, of course, at least here in the US. And so the SRM there is from 2 to 6, so still quite pale to we're starting to lean into gold a little bit. For those of you who follow the European Brewery Convention, we're looking at 4 to 12, which is basically double the SRM numbers. Now let's get to the original gravities. This should really kind of mirror the ABV, and it does. So we're looking at 1044 to 1056. If you're a Plato person, the original Plato is going to end up being about 11 to 14. But here's the fun part, the final gravity. Remember, we talked about this is not dry. This is not crisp like the German Pils is. The final gravity represents that, and that's finishing gravity is at 1009 to 1014. 1010 is that fence that falls below tends to be drier. If it falls over, it tends to have some more body and weight to it. And this skirts that and leans to the body side at 1014. For you final Plato folks, we're looking about 2.25 to about 3.5. And that will round up our vital stats for those of you who need to know this stuff. But for those of you who understand vital stats, you can learn a lot about a beer just by looking at these numbers. Most importantly, let's talk about glass and temp.
Glass and temp, I've always said it, bigger glass, lower ABV, right?
No.
Colder temperature for lower ABV. And so I want it in a big glass and I want it cold. And with that, we always go back to our favorites, the Willy Becker. We love that. There's lots of custom glasses that are not pint glasses that you can use. But I want a 16-ounce glass of this, maybe 12. I don't need to just do 8 of this. I want to, like I said, it's kind of a pounder. I want to drink more of it, and it's supposed to be enjoyed fresh too. So give me a clean glass that's bigger, 16 ounces. Serve it cold to me. Serve it fresh. That's what I want.
Yeah, half liter and something that will hold that beautiful foam for days. What temperature would you prefer this at?
I mean, out of the fridge temp, right? You can get it to warm up as you see fit, but I think cold is good. And in this case, right out of the fridge.
Yeah. Just don't serve it in a frosted glass for me. That's all I ask.
I'm right there with you. No need. I don't want to lick the inside of the freezer from that glass.
Yes. So let's get into pairing suggestions. When I'm having something like this and all those tropical flavors, I hope and pray that it's on a sunny day somewhere coastal and I can smell that sea air. That's just my preference, but this is where I want to go with this. I want to pair this with that environment of a sunny, warm day, sea air, and therefore I might have this with fish and chips. If it's a colder, overcast day, then I want a different beer. But on the sunny, warm day with fish and chips, this would be amazing. Seafood would be amazing with this beer just because of those tropical flavors and the light, crackery, light bread notes just really bring out, especially fried seafood would be fantastic. You could give me fried calamari with this and I would be happy all day long. I will mention tacos because I always mention tacos, but I'm going to ask for some good Baja or Southern California style fish tacos, which are fried, sushi, grilled chicken, all that stuff would just be amazing with this beer. How about you, Julia?
You're right in the lane of much of what I would have mentioned. And because this beer is refreshing, because this beer features really beautiful tropical and nuanced fruit notes from the hops, I find myself wanting it with like a mango ceviche, and instead of lime juice, put lemon juice in there, right? And some corn chips. My gosh, the salt will potentiate from the corn chips the whole beer and make it pop and dry out even a little bit more. The seafood thing is great. I find myself wanting this with freshly shaved ginger. So the sushi piece really resonates with me. Even though this Pilsner doesn't emphasize rice as one of the fermentables, it emphasizes pale malt, Pilsner malt, and wheat. I like it with a sushi roll because that white sticky rice is going to bring and marry with the Pilsner aspect and the malt aspect and potentiate that more. And then put some, fresh shaved ginger on top of that sushi roll and then take a bite, and you probably will have some I think emphasis of the fruity hop notes and then also refreshment factor. It'll dry out the beer even more. So that's where my mind goes.
That's fantastic. Well, that is the new Zealand Pilsner, everyone. I hope you find them. If you can't find them, then brew it yourself. If you can't brew it yourself, then go down to your local brewery and say, hey, you need to brew this style. And, in the name of science. So good luck and cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
and me, Jeremy.
Tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.